My obsession for the past, almost 10 years has been helping creative people actually create something, and being especially fascinated by individuals and teams, whether they be bands that stick together for many years, whereas most don't, or teams at Apple or Google, or designers or photographers or architects who are especially prolific and productive, whereas most of us are not. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, a few things that I've seen over the years in the research around that. Now, the sad truth, of course, is that most ideas never happen. Here I am, like, surrounded by ideas. Most ideas never happen. Now, some ideas should never happen. But even the greatest ideas suffer horrible odds. And here's the way I like to think about this. Why? What are we up against? Well, when a new idea strikes, energy and excitement is extremely high, right? This is the moment when you're willing to, grab that recorder, or start the sketch, or start writing that first chapter to that great novel, to start dreaming up that business plan. And, you stay up till 3 in the morning, 5 nights in a row, 6 nights in a row, and but energy and excitement is extremely high at that point, right? And that keeps you going. And then a week passes, 2 weeks pass, 3 weeks, you fall behind on those television shows you were watching, and you enter what I like to call the doldrums of project management, or the project plateau, where most ideas are long and gone. They just kind of get forgotten, and there's no end in sight. It's a horrible place to be. But as creative people who love what we do, we instantly escape this horrible place by coming up with another idea. And then another idea. And this process repeats itself again and again and again. And this is probably why there are more half-written novels in the world than there are novels, because we kind of keep just escaping this project plateau. And this is a very dreary, dreary place that we're on, right? This long sort of project plateau. And of course, what we're talking about here is getting organized enough, accountable enough, getting the feedback we need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to survive this project plateau and actually finish. So that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, what I'm obsessed by. A little bit of quick insight into the laboratory behind a lot of this stuff. So Behance, some of you may know, it's this large, large platform for creatives all around the world to showcase their work. So illustrators, photographers, architects, motion graphics artists, lightning graffiti artists, in Cologne, Germany, all these different folks all around the world doing interesting things, getting attribution and credit for their work on this platform, and being accountable for the work that they want to do. We've even gone in to help people organize with products to help creative individuals and teams be more organized and productive. We're always trying to find ways, even with an online think tank, to just help foster the conversation, not around the ideas and creativity, which we always talk about, but around the execution. As Edison called it, the 99% perspiration behind the genius that pushes ideas into the world. And so that's just always been something that I've personally committed my professional life to, is thinking about what's behind all this. Whereas so many folks, so many of us have ideas that will never see the light of day. What can we learn from those who consistently make ideas happen that we can bring back to everything that matters most to us? So let's talk about a few of these things. And if there were an equation for making ideas happen, this would be it. You have all the creativity and ideas, that's the side point here that everyone has enough of already in this room. There's first the organization and execution. Like, literally, how do you manage your time? How do you work every day? How do you have meetings? And when you not have meetings, a little bit of granularity stuff we're going to roll up our sleeves and talk about for just a few minutes. Then jumping into communal forces and the role of community in gaining traction around ideas. Now, community can be the team that you work with. It can be the people that you serve, the communities that you serve, your customers, clients, listeners, fans. Community can be your competitors, your industry as a whole, the world, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then the leadership capability piece. It was really interesting to me how many counterintuitive things there were doing that I saw leaders of especially productive creative teams do that we can learn from. So jumping straight into organization execution, I'll just start off by saying, all of us, in fact, at this very moment, are being inundated with stuff, right? More and more emails and texts and phone calls and LinkedIn messages, Twitter messages, Facebook messages. We're basically living a life at this point in our connected lifestyles where we're simply reacting to everything that's coming into us at any moment in time, literally pecking away at the collective inboxes of our life. We've sort of entered this era, I like to call it a reactionary workflow, where rather than being proactive in what matters most to us, we're simply reactive to the latest thing that comes into us. And that's one of those things that is really getting in the way of pushing ideas forward. These long-term things that we want to work on over time are oftentimes being replaced by the short-term things that are just being pushed at us. And that's why actually a lot of the folks that I go and meet with, even CEOs of social media companies, talk about preserving these windows of non-stimulation in their day, where they're actually forced to disconnect. We used to be forced to disconnect when we drove into work every day, or we used to have these forced periods of disconnection between meetings when we were walking between buildings. And now, of course, we don't have that anymore. We're always connected. Probably the shower is the last frontier of forced disconnection. And great things happen in the shower, as we all know. So we want to have those windows of non-stimulation in our day and protect them. And during those periods of time, focus on the long-term things, the research, the stuff that inspires us, and the long-term goals we're pursuing. Another thing I want to convince you of real quickly is just the importance of spending energy on how we organize. We're always so focused on our ideas and the things we're excited about doing with our friends or teams or whatever, and we're often not spending the time thinking about, well, what do we do with these ideas? How do we organize? What's our system? How do we iterate our system and optimize it and all these different things? I would argue that the impact you make with your ideas is a product, not a sum, of the creativity you have times your focus on the organization around those ideas. And so if you apply a little math to this notion, you realize you can have all the great creativity ideas in the world, but if you never capture it, if you never organize around it, nothing's going to come of it. And then there's this sort of controversial suggestion that if we perhaps focus a little less on searching for the next best idea and a little more on organizing around the ideas that we may have more of an impact. And there's some extreme examples, like Thomas Kincaid, recently passed away, as artist, who has a gallery in every resort town in America, universally despised by art critics, but a factory. James Patterson claims he writes 7 novels at once. This is someone who's written more best-selling books than Random House's published books combined. And this is someone who the literary critics say, oh, the plots are the same, So maybe those are extreme ends of the spectrum. This is not only true for individuals. This is also true for, this is also true for teams and for companies. There's a magazine that comes out every quarter, I believe, called Supply Chain Management. I doubt anyone in here is a subscriber. But all these COOs, these head of operations of these different companies get this magazine every quarter. And once a year, they have the list of the 100 most organized companies in the world based on metrics and supply chain management and how organized they are from a real measured perspective. And what companies are always on this list? Like FedEx, UPS, Walmart, these companies that are known for logistics and real-time management of their supply chain. Well, interestingly enough, for the past 6 years, number 1 in the list of 100 most organized companies in the world is this company. Known for what? Creativity, right? Innovation. And so you have to wonder if Tim Cook, the COO, was as, if not more important than the other guy, in terms of actually taking these ideas that came up in people's minds and actually pushing them to see the light of day in an organized fashion. So we have to work with a bias towards action. That's one of the things I found as I was asking people across industries, what tools do you use? What's your way of managing projects and staying organized? The consistent thing I heard, while everyone else's system was really different in a DIY approach, everyone was saying I work and operate with a bias towards action. When I leave a meeting without any action steps, I stop having that meeting altogether. I usually have standing meetings where we stand and we're forced to get to the point because no one wants to stand, their knees get tired. I heard that a lot too. And having this culture of capturing action. After any meeting, making sure that we go around and each person says with their own voice, here's what I'm going to do, here's what I'm going to follow up with. And knowing that whenever people do that, you actually always come out with either duplicative action steps or someone missed something, but always increased accountability. People magically actually do what they say more likely when they say it out loud at the end of a meeting. Okay, so there could be a whole hour on that stuff. But I want to jump over to communal forces. This is kind of fun. When I met with all these different folks across different industries and independent artists and people at large companies, I started to classify a lot of the folks I met into 3 camps: the doers, the dreamers, and the incrementalists. Now, the dreamers, alluded to in the Pixar Disney discussion, the dreamers are like, wait, maybe we can do this, maybe we can get so-and-so involved, even 3 days before the deadline. Wait a second, there's another partner we can get involved, and let's try this, and let's test this. The dreamer goes to bed at night happy when there is a new idea introduced to his or her team the next day. That is like the dreamer's mecca. Then you have the doers. The doers are more like the Debbie Downers of the world, right? The doers go to bed at night happy when there is nothing new in the pipeline, nothing new to introduce everything's on plan and on budget and as scheduled. That is what the doers love, at work every day, is when everything is just running on time. And then you have the incrementalists who rotate from dreamer mode to doer mode to dreamer mode to doer mode. The problem with them, they create too many damn things and none of them ever scale. So the point being is, regardless of what you identify at different times, you need to make sure that you're sharing ideas liberally with people with the opposite tendency. right? Just sharing ideas liberally, and there's so many folks I met who just would say serial entrepreneurs and others who would just always put it out in their blog and know that a lot of people ignore it, but some people will keep them accountable to it or refine it or connect them to someone else who's doing something similar. They were never worried about someone stealing it because they knew it was unlikely to happen anyways. And they would just get it out there because they knew that this was the way that their ideas were more likely to actually happen. Competition is important. Here's a quick story about a guy named Noah Kalina, a Brooklyn-based photographer. For whatever reason, I think 10 years ago, he started taking a photograph of himself every single day. No end in sight, no purpose for this. Struggling photographer. And then one evening, this is like now 5 years ago, he's on a photography blog, and he comes across a post by another woman, a photographer, who had been doing the same thing of herself for 2 years. And she's talking about how brilliant this is, and how she's going to debut it to the world. And he thinks, no way is she going to beat me to the punch. I've been doing this for 5 years religiously, but no one knows. So in a period of a week, he puts together this YouTube video of every single photograph in rapid succession. He puts it up on YouTube, and it becomes one of the most viewed YouTube videos of all time. He gets on the cover of all these different photography magazines, on the cover, on these morning shows, and really, the impetus to act for him was the moment where this idea became realized. And it was the competition that we pace ourselves with, even people that we work with. As artists, we never say, oh, I have a competitor. But in fact, when you pace yourself, sometimes that delivers the impetus to act on something that would otherwise never see the light of day. Competition is important. A couple other things that teams talked about, the importance of fighting. There's so many great, productive, creative teams that have stuck together for so many years talked about how they fight. They can fight. And it sort of was described to me as this multidimensional tug of war, where each person's advocating for their opinion, what they believe is right, and they're yanking the rope towards them as they're advocating, they're raising their voice, and everyone is as I yank it towards me, you're all forced to explore my design space of opinion, my solutions. And then you yank it towards you, and then I'm forced to explore what you think. And as we do this, we're covering all the terrain. But all too often what happens is someone says, you know what, this is getting too heated for me. Like, I'm fine with whatever. This is, whatever. And that is called, of course, apathy, right? And as soon as that happens, we're no longer exploring that area of possibility. And so what a lot of the leaders of these teams do is they fight apathy ruthlessly. They're always constantly re-engaging people into the process. But they're making sure that they're not fighting themselves down to the lowest common denominator, because that's also a bad thing. To explore this, I went to meet with some experienced design firms, like one in particular that designed the September 11th memorial. And you can imagine all the constituents that they have to please, right? The victims' families, the government, the design community, the architecture community, the general public. And I'm like, how the hell do you make anything that moves people when you have all these constituents whittling down your ideas into something that is completely unremarkable and has been done before? And the consistent feedback I got was you have to find those sacred extremes, those one or two things that are most distinguishing, and you have to hold on to those things dearly throughout the process and be willing to compromise on pretty much everything else, which is really hard as an artist and a perfectionist, where you have a particular vision for something. But you really have to do that, and generating buy-in with those constituencies ahead of time. This is how you can get big things through the pipeline that would otherwise never see the light of day. Last piece here is on the leadership capability side. And some of the things I acknowledged, or just observed in some of these very productive, creative teams that consistently made ideas happen. The first was that I found that a lot of them had what I call an immune system, a really strong immune system. You know how the human body has an immune system that kills off anything that's new? And that's how we stay healthy, right? The only time you wouldn't want a great, strong immune system is if you were to get an organ transplant. And the first thing the doctor does is they suppress your immune system so you can take on something entirely new and actually change your body, change who you are. And so when I went into these really great teams, just churn things out again and again, it seemed like they operated with a strong immune system on a day-to-day basis. During daily operations, those doers that we talked about that kill everything just quickly as soon as they come up, that keep us on track and on budget, they were empowered, they were respected, they were hired, But when we were trying to solve a problem and do something new and we went into brainstorm mode, that is when the doers would be suppressed and the dreamers would be allowed to propose something new. Now, it's a problem in the creative world because a lot of the dreamers are the ones who start things, and they just want to hire other people who are dreamers. And their litmus test is like, would I want to have a beer with this person? Great, let's bring them on the team. Let's bring them in the band, whatever. And then it becomes this intoxicated orgy of idea generation and nothing ever gets done. There's no sober monitor, or anything that really gets us there. So we need to make sure that we not only find and hire and empower, but also respect the role of the dreamer and the doer at different times, and that's the art of a great creative team. We also need to hire people with initiative over experience. How many great startups did I go to where, or early in the days when they were a startup, they just hired people based on initiative. They couldn't afford to hire the people based on experience. They were too expensive. And some of them remember that and keep hiring people based on initiative rather than experience. But some of them become resume snobs and start hiring the wrong people. They figure they have the money, they can now hire the famous person that's so good at whatever, but they don't have the initiative and things don't end up actually happening. Something to keep about and keep in mind. And then just to close, one of the things that I was personally struck by as I was meeting a lot of these, remarkable leaders with great trajectories in the creative world, I would often ask them, when was the moment when things started to click, where you started to realize you were really onto something, building something new, and willing to take that risk? And a lot of them tracked back to a moment in their career where they learned to gain confidence from doubt. They, for some reason, as people told them that they were doing something stupid or something wrong, something clicked and they became more confident in the decision they were making. I talked to one guy who was in the fast track to the top of a major publishing house. And he was going to be really the top publisher. And for whatever reason, 6 or 7 years ago, he decides to take this small job in this little fledgling group of 3 other people called digital publishing. And people tell him, you're crazy. Like, no one's ever going to read a book on a computer. Don't throw away your career. And but you have to wonder, as more and more people tell you you are crazy, you're either crazy or you're really onto something. And so I guess the message here is that society is very, very hypocritical. We shun people before we celebrate them. We shun the college dropouts of the world, the Jobs, the Zuckerbergs, the Gates. We shun the people who are artists, who are visionaries at first, and then we celebrate them later on. And I guess what we need to remember is that nothing extraordinary is ever achieved through ordinary means. And we should gain confidence from the doubt we encounter along the way. Thank you.